Have you ever felt different from those around you? As if there's something about you that sets you apart, something unseen yet deeply powerful. Imagine for a moment that God Himself placed a divine mark upon you, an invisible seal that signifies you are chosen, protected, and called to something greater. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "The real Son of God is at your side, beginning to turn you into the same kind of thing as Himself." But how do you know if you bear this divine mark? Is it something tangible, or is it written deep within your soul? Today, we'll uncover the unmistakable signs that you are marked by God. Signs that, once recognized, will change the way you see yourself and your purpose forever. Standing on the edge of a battlefield, the air thick with tension, arrows soaring through the sky, the clash of swords echoing in the distance. Chaos surrounds you, yet you remain untouched, not because of armor, not because of skill, but because of something far greater. An invisible shield, an unbreakable fortress that no enemy can penetrate. This is what it means to be marked by God. It is a divine protection that defies human understanding. When the world expects you to fall, you remain standing. When danger lurks, unseen hands guide you away. Have you ever walked through a situation where harm seemed inevitable, yet you came out unscathed? That was not luck. That was not coincidence. That was God's mark upon you. Psalm 91:3 declares, "Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence." But what does that truly mean? It means that no scheme, no trap set against you will succeed. The enemy may lay plans, may weave deceptions, but those marked by God cannot be ensnared. Think of David, a mere shepherd boy who stood against Goliath. A young man untrained in war, holding nothing but a sling and a few stones. Yet the giant fell. Why? Because David was not alone. God's hand was upon him. Or consider Daniel, cast into a den of hungry lions, creatures bred for destruction, their roars echoing in the darkness. Yet, when morning came, he was still alive, untouched. How is that possible? Because he carried the mark of divine protection. The lions, fierce and starved, saw him as prey but could not touch him. God had sealed their mouths. And what about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, thrown into a furnace so hot that even those who cast them in were consumed by the flames? Yet when the king looked into the fire, he did not see 3 men burning. He saw 4 walking freely, untouched by the heat. The Son of God Himself was there, shielding them. This protection is not just a story from ancient times. It is a reality that exists today. Have you ever narrowly escaped a disaster, a car accident, a sudden illness, an unexpected danger? Have you ever felt an unseen force pulling you away from harm? That is divine intervention. But God's protection goes beyond the physical. It shields your mind, your heart, your soul. How many times has despair knocked at your door, yet you found strength to carry on? How many times has fear tried to consume you, but peace took its place instead? That is His shield around you. Psalm 91:5-6 promises, "You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday." This means that whether the attack comes in broad daylight, when everyone can see, or in the darkest hours of the night, when no one is watching, God is still your defender. The world may not recognize it, but you are never truly alone. Perhaps you have faced opposition, at work, in your family, even among friends. People who sought to harm you, to tear you down, to see you fail. Yet somehow, their plans never succeed. Somehow, you rise above. That is not your doing, it is God's. He frustrates the plans of the wicked. Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Notice, it does not say that weapons won't be formed. It does not promise a life without battles. But it does guarantee victory. The weapons may rise, but they will not prevail. The attacks may come, but they will not break you. Now consider this. Every morning you wake up unharmed. Do you think it's just because you locked your doors? What about the unseen battles that took place while you slept? The spiritual attacks launched against you? Have you ever heard stories of people who went to sleep and never woke up, though they were perfectly healthy the night before? Demons do not need a physical door to enter. They do not require permission from men, but they cannot bypass the mark of God. It is His presence upon you that keeps the enemy at bay. Psalm 127:1 reminds us, "Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain." You can have the strongest security, the best protection, but if God is not shielding you, it is meaningless. Think of the Israelites. When the angel of death passed over Egypt, it was the blood of the lamb on their doorposts that kept them safe. Today that mark is upon you, not in the form of physical blood, but in the Spirit. It is the seal of God that declares, "This one belongs to me. No harm shall touch them." Even in the darkest valley, you are never alone. The psalmist said, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Fear has no hold on those who are marked. Worry has no dominion over those who are chosen. And yet, there are moments when we question. When suffering comes, when trials press in, we ask, "God, where are you?" But let me tell you this. Just because the storm is raging does not mean the shield is gone. A bird does not stop flying because the wind is strong. A tree does not stop growing because the rain falls. And those marked by God do not crumble when trials arise. Look back at your life. Count the times you should have fallen, but didn't. The moments that should have broken you, but instead made you stronger. That is evidence of His protection. That is proof of His mark upon you. So the next time you find yourself in the midst of chaos, when the world shakes and everything seems uncertain, remember this. You are covered. You are shielded. You are marked by God. The sun scorching above, your throat parched, your strength fading. With no food, no water, and no shelter in sight, hope begins to slip away. But then, out of nowhere, a stream appears, water flowing from a rock. Manna falls from the sky, enough to sustain you for another day. This is what it means to be marked by God. When you are His, provision follows. Not because of your effort alone, not because of luck or coincidence, but because the hand of the Almighty goes before you, preparing the way, supplying what you need before you even realize you need it. Matthew 6:26 declares, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" If God takes care of the birds, the creatures of the earth and the fish of the sea, how much more will He take care of you, His beloved? Think of the Israelites wandering through the wilderness for 40 years. A barren land, no harvest, no rivers, yet they never went hungry. Each morning, manna fell from heaven. Each evening, quail filled their camp. When they thirsted, water sprang forth from dry rock. Not once did God abandon them. Have you ever found yourself in a place of need? A situation where you saw no way out, where resources were scarce, where the answer seemed impossible, yet at the last moment, provision came. A bill you couldn't pay suddenly covered, a door that seemed shut forever suddenly opening, a desperate prayer suddenly answered. That is God's unseen hand at work. That is His mark upon your life. This provision is not just physical, it extends into every aspect of your being. Have you ever received wisdom at the perfect time? Encouragement when you needed it most? Strength when you felt weak? That too is divine provision. Think of Elijah. The prophet stood alone, persecuted, weary, on the brink of despair. Yet God sent ravens to bring him food. He led him to a widow who, though she had only a handful of flour and a little oil, never ran out. When you are marked by God, even the most unlikely sources become channels of blessing. But understand this, God's provision is not always what we expect. Sometimes He does not give us what we want. He gives us what we need. C.S. Lewis once said, "God doesn't give us everything we want, but He does fulfill His promises." Perhaps you have prayed for financial abundance, but instead God teaches you wisdom in managing what you have. Perhaps you have asked for a new opportunity, but instead He redirects your path towards something greater. His provision is not always immediate, but it is always perfect. Have you ever lost something, only to later realize that it was never meant for you? A job you were desperate for but did not get? A relationship you held on to but God removed? Have you ever looked back and thought, "Thank God I didn't end up there"? Sometimes God's greatest provision is in what He withholds. Think of Joseph. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. To any outsider, it looked like God had abandoned him. But in reality, God was positioning him for something greater. In one moment, he went from a prisoner to the second most powerful man in Egypt. The suffering was not the end, it was the path to the blessing. This is why those marked by God do not fear lack. Even when the well seems dry, even when the resources seem scarce, they trust. They know that He is Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. Psalm 37:25 says, "I was young, and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging for bread." A child of a wealthy king does not beg for scraps, and you, as a child of God, are an heir to His abundance. This does not mean life will always be easy. It does not mean wealth and riches will always be yours. But it does mean that what you truly need, whether strength, peace, wisdom, or provision, will never be withheld. Consider this. Have you ever faced a moment of crisis and help arrived just in time? That friend who reached out when you needed comfort, that opportunity that came when you had lost all hope, that unexpected blessing that seemed to appear from nowhere. Nothing just happens. The provision of God follows those who carry His mark. It is a quiet, steady assurance that no matter what lies ahead, you will never be left empty-handed. So the next time you find yourself in need, do not panic. Do not fear. Look back at all the times He has provided before and remind yourself, if He did it then, He will do it again. You are marked, and because of that, you will never lack what truly matters. People take notice. Opportunities unfold. Doors that once seemed bolted shut swing open effortlessly. You didn't force them open. You didn't demand attention. Yet somehow favor follows you wherever you go. This is what it means to be marked by God. His favor is like an invisible key, unlocking paths that no human effort could. When you are chosen, you do not need to chase blessings. They find you. Deuteronomy 28:13 declares, "The Lord will make you the head and not the tail." If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God and carefully follow them, you will always be at the top, never at the bottom. God's favor is not about status, wealth, or popularity. It is about divine recognition, about being elevated in ways that defy logic. Think of Joseph. He was sold into slavery, betrayed and imprisoned. By all human standards, he was forgotten, yet wherever he went, he was favored. Potiphar, his master, trusted him with everything. The prison warden placed him in charge, and in one moment, a forgotten prisoner became the ruler of Egypt. That is the power of divine favor. It is not limited by circumstances. It is not controlled by human opinion. It does not wait for permission. When God's hand is upon you, no one can keep you down. Have you ever wondered why certain opportunities come to you with ease while others struggle for years? Why people gravitate toward you? Why you receive blessings that others say are impossible? It is not luck. It is not chance. It is favor. Psalm 5:12 tells us, "Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield." But what does this favor look like in real life? Perhaps you've applied for a job, and despite having no connections or perfect qualifications, you were chosen. Perhaps you've walked into a place where no one knew you, yet you were treated like royalty. Perhaps doors that were once closed, opportunities you thought were lost forever, suddenly reopened. That is favor. It is unearned. It cannot be bought. It cannot be explained. Think of Esther, a young woman, an orphan with no royal lineage, yet when she stood before the king, he extended his golden scepter. Among all the women in the land, she was chosen as queen. Why? Because favor was upon her. Favor does not mean life will be free of challenges. Look at Daniel, a foreigner in Babylon surrounded by enemies who sought to destroy him. Yet, through every trial, favor protected him. The king recognized his wisdom. His enemies' traps failed. Even when thrown into a den of lions, he walked out untouched. Have you ever faced opposition, yet somehow you still rose? Have people plotted against you, yet their plans backfired? That is divine favor in action. But beware, favor is a double-edged sword. With it comes responsibility. Joseph's favor made him a ruler, but it also brought jealousy. Esther's favor placed her in a palace, but it also required courage to save her people. Daniel's favor elevated him, but it also led to conspiracies against his life. When you carry God's favor, not everyone will celebrate you. Some will envy you, some will try to tear you down, but they cannot remove what God has placed upon you. Isaiah 60:1-2 declares, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Darkness covers the earth, but the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you." If you have ever experienced unexplainable recognition, if blessings have chased you down, if you have found yourself rising when others expected you to fall, understand this: you are marked. God's favor is not about material gain. It is about influence. It is about divine positioning. It is about God placing you exactly where you need to be for his purpose. So do not fear when favor comes with opposition. Do not doubt when blessings seem too great to comprehend. Walk boldly in the knowledge that you are chosen, that you are set apart, that God's favor surrounds you like a shield. Because when you are marked by God, no one, not even the enemy himself, can shut the doors he has opened for you. Unbothered, unshaken, completely at peace, no matter what storms surrounded them. The world may be crumbling, but they walk with quiet confidence, as if they know something no one else does. That is the mark of God. It is a peace so deep, so unshakable, that no external force can steal it away. Jesus himself said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." This peace is different from the fleeting comfort the world offers. It is not based on circumstances, on wealth, on status, or on stability. It is supernatural. It is the kind of peace that lets a man stand in the face of death and still smile. It is the kind of peace that lets a woman lose everything and still say, "God is good." Think of Jesus on the boat with his disciples. A violent storm raged, the waves crashed, the winds howled, the disciples panicked. But where was Jesus? Asleep. Not because he was unaware, not because he did not care, but because he carried a peace that no storm could disturb. And when he finally rose, he did not fight the storm. He did not struggle. He simply spoke, "Peace, be still." And the winds obeyed. That is the power of divine peace. When you carry it, storms do not control you. You control the storm. Have you ever faced a situation where everything in your life seemed to fall apart, yet deep inside you felt a strange calm? People looked at you and asked, "Why aren't you panicking?" But you knew, somehow, some way, God had everything under control. That is the peace that comes with being marked by him. Look at Paul. He was beaten, imprisoned, shipwrecked, abandoned. Yet he wrote in Philippians 4:7, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." How can a man be in chains and still have peace? How can someone face trials and still rejoice? The world cannot understand it. But those marked by God know, peace is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of God in the midst of it. Have you ever noticed how worry and fear dominate the lives of those who do not know Him? Anxiety about the future, stress over money, fear of failure. They seek peace in relationships, in success, in material things. But these things fade. Yet those who are marked by God walk differently. Psalm 23:4 declares, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." This peace does not mean life will be without difficulty. It does not mean you will never feel sadness or pain. But it does mean that no matter what happens, you will not be destroyed by it. Think of Stephen, the first martyr of the church. As he was being stoned to death, he did not scream in terror. He did not curse his enemies. Instead, he looked up and saw heaven open. He saw the glory of God. And even as the stones struck him, he prayed for his executioners. That is the kind of peace that only comes from God. The enemy will try to rob you of this peace. He will whisper lies. He will stir up fear. He will send distractions. But when you are marked by God, you will recognize the deception. You will stand firm. Isaiah 26:3 promises, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." Trust, that is the secret. When you know who holds your future, fear loses its power. When you understand that no storm is greater than the one who walks with you, anxiety fades. Do you carry this kind of peace? When trials come, do you crumble or do you stand? When the world panics, do you remain steady? If you have ever walked through fire yet remained unburned, if you have ever lost something yet still had joy, if you have ever faced uncertainty yet still felt safe, then you have seen the evidence of God's mark upon you. The next time fear knocks at your door, let your answer be clear. I am marked by God. I do not fear the future because I know who holds it. You are not just anyone. You are chosen. You are set apart. And because of that, you carry a peace that nothing and no one can take away. Have you ever wondered why some people break under pressure while others rise above it? Why some are crushed by hardship, yet others emerge stronger, wiser, unshaken? This is the power of being marked by God. It is not about avoiding battles. It is about being victorious in them. It is the divine ability to walk through fire and come out without a single scar. Romans 8:37 declares, "No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us." Not just survivors, not just fighters, more than conquerors. This means that trials do not just test you, they refine you. That opposition does not just challenge you, it elevates you. That suffering does not just wound you, it transforms you. Look at David. He was a shepherd, overlooked by his family, dismissed as insignificant. Yet, when a giant named Goliath stood before Israel, trembling warriors stepped back. But David stepped forward. He did not wear the king's armor. He did not hold a soldier's sword. All he had was a sling, a stone, and the unshakable confidence that God was with him. And the giant fell. That is the mark of divine victory. It is not about what is in your hands. It is about what is in your heart. Think of Job. Everything was taken from him, his wealth, his health, his family. The world would have expected him to collapse, to curse God, to give up. But instead he declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Job 13:15. And in the end, Job received twice as much as he had before. This is the power of those who are marked by God. When the enemy thinks he has destroyed them, he only strengthens them. When he thinks he has silenced them, he only amplifies their testimony. Have you ever faced a situation that should have crushed you, yet you rose? A heartbreak that should have broken you, yet you healed. A failure that should have defined you, yet you overcame. That is no accident. That is no mere resilience. That is the mark of God upon your life. Psalm 34:19 says, "The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all." Not from some troubles, all of them. Victory is not about avoiding battles, it is about overcoming them. It is about walking through the valley of the shadow of death and fearing no evil. It is about being thrown into a lion's den and coming out untouched. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit, years of hardship, years of injustice. Yet in one moment, the forgotten prisoner became the second most powerful man in Egypt. His trials were not his downfall, they were his preparation. Some of you are in a season of hardship. You feel forgotten, you feel trapped. You ask, "God, why am I going through this?" But what if your struggle is not a punishment? What if it is a preparation? What if the doors that seem locked are not meant to keep you out, but to build your strength before they open? 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." When you are weak, that is when God shows his strength. When you have nothing left, that is when his power is revealed. Victory is not about never falling, it is about getting back up. Proverbs 24:16 tells us, "The righteous may fall 7 times, but still get up." This is what separates those who are marked by God from those who are not. The enemy may knock them down, but they do not stay down. The fire may burn around them, but they do not burn. The storm may rage, but they do not sink. Because they are chosen, because they are set apart, because they are marked by God. So the next time life tries to break you, the next time the enemy whispers, "This is the end," remember this. You were never meant to be defeated. You were meant to rise. And when you rise, you do not rise alone. The same God who brought David to victory, who restored Job, who elevated Joseph, that same God walks with you. You are not just anyone. You are his. And because of that, you will always overcome. Have you ever met someone whose presence alone radiates warmth, kindness, and an unshakable love for others? Someone who forgives easily, gives generously, and treats even their enemies with grace. This is not natural, this is divine. It is the mark of God upon a person's life, a love so deep and transformative that it changes not only the person who carries it, but also everyone around them. John 13:35 says, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." Not by how much scripture you know, not by how often you go to church, but by love. This is what separates those who are truly marked by God from those who only claim to be. The evidence is not in words, but in action. It is in how they treat their neighbors, their friends, their family, and even their enemies. Think of Jesus. He did not just love those who loved him, he loved those who betrayed him. As he hung on the cross, suffering unjustly, he did not curse those who crucified him. Instead, he prayed for them, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. That is the kind of love that can only come from God. Have you ever found yourself forgiving someone who never apologized, helping someone who once hurt you, loving someone who did not deserve it? That is not weakness. That is evidence that you are marked by God. 1 John 4:7-8 reminds us, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." If you carry his mark, you carry his nature. And God's nature is love. But love is not just about kindness, it is about sacrifice. Think of Ruth. She had every reason to leave her mother-in-law, Naomi, after her husband died. She owed her nothing. Yet out of love, she stayed, declaring, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Ruth 1:16. That love, selfless, unwavering, sacrificial, set Ruth apart, and because of it, she was blessed beyond measure. Think of David and Jonathan, two men who should have been enemies, one the son of the reigning king, the other anointed to take his place. Yet, instead of rivalry, they shared a bond of deep, godly love. Jonathan protected David, even at the cost of his own position. That is what happens when you are marked by God. Your love is not based on what is convenient. It is not transactional. It does not depend on who deserves it. It is constant, unshakable, unwavering. But this kind of love is not easy. It is easy to love those who love us back. It is easy to be kind when it costs nothing. But what about when love requires forgiveness? When love requires humility? Jesus said in Matthew 5:44, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." That is the test. That is the mark. Have you ever been wronged, yet instead of seeking revenge, you chose peace? Have you ever been insulted, yet responded with kindness? Have you ever had the chance to hurt someone, yet instead you blessed them? That is what it means to be set apart. Look at Joseph. His own brothers betrayed him, sold him into slavery, and left him for dead. Yet when he rose to power and had the opportunity to repay them with vengeance, what did he do? He forgave. He provided for them. He restored them. That is what it means to be marked by God. This love does not just transform you, it transforms the world around you. It changes how you see people. Where others see enemies, you see lost souls. Where others see burdens, you see opportunities to serve. Where others see brokenness, you see potential. It changes how you speak. You no longer tear people down, you build them up. You no longer gossip, you encourage. You no longer curse, you bless. It changes how you live. You are no longer bound by bitterness, by anger, by pride. You are free. Free to love, free to forgive, free to reflect the very heart of God. And that is why those who are marked by Him are different. They do not love the way the world loves. They do not hold grudges. They do not seek revenge. They do not abandon people when it is inconvenient. They love, not because they have to, not because they want something in return, but because they are marked. 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." This is the standard. This is the calling. Do you love this way? Because if you do, it is not by your own strength. It is not because you are a good person. It is because you are set apart, because you are chosen, because you are marked by God. Wavering conviction that nothing seems to shake them. They are not arrogant, they are not reckless, but they stand firm, unafraid, unmovable, no matter what comes their way. This is the mark of God. When He places His hand upon you, fear loses its grip. Doubt fades. You no longer shrink back. Instead, you step forward in boldness, because you know who you are and whose you are. 2 Timothy 1:7 declares, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind." Those who are marked by God walk differently. They do not hesitate when God calls them. They do not stay silent when truth must be spoken. They do not retreat when the enemy rises against them. Look at Moses, a man who once hid in the wilderness, afraid to speak, afraid to lead. Yet when God's mark was upon him, he stood before Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth, and declared, "Let my people go." That was not natural boldness. That was divine boldness. Look at Peter, Once he denied Jesus 3 times, trembling in fear. But after receiving the Holy Spirit, he stood before thousands, boldly proclaiming the gospel, unafraid of prison, unafraid of death. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Courage, dear heart." Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it. And when you are marked by God, you do not walk in human courage. You walk in divine confidence. Have you ever felt the urge to speak up when everyone else was silent? Have you ever refused to compromise when others gave in? Have you ever stood firm in your faith, even when it cost you something? That is no accident. That is no mere personality trait. That is the evidence that you are set apart. Acts 4:13 tells us that when the religious leaders saw the boldness of Peter and John, they were astonished because these were unschooled, ordinary men. Yet, it was undeniable that they had been with Jesus. This is what happens when you carry the mark of God. You may not have the best qualifications. You may not have the highest status. But when God's presence is upon you, no one can ignore you. Think of David standing before Goliath, a young boy with no armor, no training, no experience in war, facing a seasoned giant who had terrorized an entire army. Yet David did not waver. He did not run. He looked at Goliath and said, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." And with one stone, the giant fell. That is what happens when you are marked by God. You do not need worldly power. You do not need approval from men. You stand in the authority of the one who called you. But this boldness does not come without opposition. Look at Daniel. He was told not to pray. The law forbade it. The punishment was death. Yet Daniel did not hide. He did not whisper prayers in secret. He opened his windows, knelt and prayed, just as he had always done. And when he was thrown into the lion's den, did he beg for mercy? Did he renounce his faith? No, he stood firm. And in the morning he was still alive. Why? Because boldness in God is never wasted. Because those who stand for him never stand alone. Have you ever been ridiculed for your faith? Have you ever lost opportunities because you refused to compromise? Have you ever faced pressure to stay silent, yet spoke anyway? Then know this: you are marked. You are set apart for a purpose, and that purpose is not to blend in, it is to stand out. Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." Light does not apologize for shining. A city on a hill does not lower itself to remain unseen, and those who are marked by God do not shrink back in fear. There will be moments when the enemy tries to silence you, when the world pressures you to conform, when people tell you to compromise, to keep quiet, to step aside. But you were not created to hide. You were not chosen to remain silent. You were marked to be bold. So stand firm, speak truth, walk in confidence. And when fear tries to whisper, when the enemy tries to shake you, remind yourself of this unshakable truth: I am marked by God, and I will not be moved. And called to a higher purpose. But remember, this mark is not automatic. It requires something from you. First, live in holiness. Sin distances you from God, while obedience keeps his mark upon you. Second, remain humble. Pride removes God's favor, but humility keeps you aligned with him. Third, trust him completely. Rely on him, and he will guide your path. The choice is yours. Will you embrace your divine identity, or will you walk away from it? If you recognize these signs in your life, rejoice. You are marked by God. And if you don't yet see them, seek him, and he will place his mark upon you. The greatest blessing is not in the things you have, but in knowing to whom you belong. You are his, forever marked by his love.